this week's verse where it says, "No eye has seen, no ear has heard what the Lord has promised for those who love Him, who wait on Him, and trust Him." And just and loving Him is obeying Him from what we've been taught and what we read. And I pray and believe that the Lord will cause me to do His will and good pleasure in every way. And the parallel reference where in Isaiah 64 verse 4, where it says, "No eye has seen what the Lord would do for those who act on behalf of the one who waits for Him." And that's what I want to do. Wait in hope. I've done it in the past, and I want to do that even now. In the present and in the future, to wait on Him in faith for my every spiritual and earthly need. And I was also encouraged this weekend. It encourages me to think of what we heard this weekend at the fellowship, where the darkest cube, my dark cube, whether it's my heart or my home, can be the Lord's most holy place, where He dwells, and where His love can burn in my heart and at home too. And I'm so thankful for that heart of revelation, and from what I heard from those amidst us. And I pray that the Lord will also give me a heart of revelation, like what brother was sharing, that the Lord will enlighten my heart, and that I would really seek for that heart of revelation. And again, I was really blessed by what I heard this weekend, that my dark cube can be the Lord's most holy place. And I believe that the Lord will make that true in my life more and more.
Praise God. I was blessed by the word endurance this past week. It was on my mind quite a lot, especially given that things were a bit busy in my life. And it's not a word that I've read in the Bible but not appreciated much before. But when I was looking it up, it was interesting to see how many times either endurance or persistence, these two words, came up in the context of our Christian walk. One verse that I remember is in James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. It says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance." I think, for me, when I think of trials, there are a lot of things that I think of could be the outcome of my trials. I could get to know the Lord better. I could, strengthen my faith. I could stand more firmly on the love of God. But what James says in this passage is that trials, the reason God gives me trials is so that my endurance increases. In a similar passage in Romans chapter 5, he says, "Your trials produce perseverance, and perseverance produces so on up till hope." But all to say, the trials that God lets into my life is to produce endurance. And so I was thinking of why endurance is so important. And especially me being a young guy, it's easy when I'm young, when things are starting out, for me to start my Christian walk with a lot of zeal, with a lot of fire, and then kind of cool down as things go on, as different things happen in life, that I'm not enduring so hard after the Lord. I'm not persisting as much as I should after the Lord. That the other things in my life become more important, and I cool down in following the Lord. And I think, if I look at my earthly life and look at the things I do on earth, there's nothing on earth that I can do that I can start out with complete passion and complete endurance and not finish it well. Take something as simple as cooking a piece of chicken, right? If I take a good piece of chicken and spend the time to make a good marinade for it, I make sure I add the right amount of salt and the right amount of pepper and the right amount of chili, and I make sure it's marinating in the sauce for the right amount of time. I put in all that effort, but then when I throw the piece of chicken on the grill, I just say, well, I've worked so hard so far. Maybe it's time for me to take a break. I've not finished cooking my chicken, but I've put in so much work. I've been enduring and preparing this piece of meat for so long. Maybe now it's fine for me to just sit back and let it cook, and then I'll come back whenever I feel good enough, and I'll take the piece of chicken. I think we all know what would happen to that piece of chicken. That effort that I put in at the start of marinating that chicken and making sure I put exactly 1 pinch of salt and half a teaspoon of chili powder is not going to avail of anything if I don't make sure that I endure and watch this piece of chicken as it cooks and make sure it cooks to the right amount. So the same thing is true in my Christian life. If I start my Christian life saying, in zeal for Christ, making sure I'm hearing the word every day, making sure I'm reading the word as often as I should, I'm coming to church and doing what I should, but then I cool off. When I come to the end of my life, I could be like so many examples that we see in the Old Testament, where people started off so well, but ended their lives so far from God. we studied the life of Isaac, and that was a warning for me too. Isaac had a godly father. Abraham was such a godly man. He saw the example that Abraham set for him, and he lived a godly life at the start of his life. He had such good spiritual vision, but by the end of his life, he had drifted so far away from God that he was running after the needs of his body. He preferred eating good food versus obeying God and blessing the son that he was supposed to. We read of Solomon, who had, again, a very godly father. He had such a good upbringing. He had seen David. He had seen the goods and the bads of David. He had seen all of this firsthand. And when he started his life, fantastic. He built the temple. It was not a small feat. He built the temple of God. He was known to be the wisest man at the start of his life. But by the end of his life, he was worshiping other idols and just falling away from God. It doesn't matter in their lives that they started their lives on zeal for Christ. It mattered if they endured, if they persisted towards the end. But when we come to the New Testament, I see examples in the New Testament which is completely the opposite. If you look at all the apostles, you look at Peter. He started out, he was a fairly ignorant man. He was a fisherman. He had a lot of zeal for Christ at the start, which is fantastic. But you look at the end, look all the way to the end of his life, he's held on to that. He was crucified upside down for the sake of the Lord, and he stood true for Christ all the way to the end of his life. You look at John. John, you could say, started out a bit more weird because he was known to be a very a short-tempered person. He asked Jesus to call down fire to kind of burn down a whole city when he started being a disciple. But you come to the end of his life, he's grown so much, he's endured in his following the Lord that he's known as the disciple of love. You read First John, you read Revelation, and you see at the end of his life how he's grown to be an even more zealous Christian than he was when he started. You look at Paul. When he started his walk, he was zealous for Christ, burning for the Lord, and all the way to the end, he holds that fire. When he's in prison that he can't even move around and spread the gospel, he's sharing stuff to the prisoners, to his guards, so that he can encourage them and save them for Christ. He's writing epistles when he's in jail instead of murmuring and complaining. He's still enduring and persisting after the Lord at the end of his life. And these are the examples that I need to follow, not the examples in the Old Testament where people started with so much fire. They started with so much desire to serve the Lord and to thank the Lord for all that He's done for them. But towards the end of their life, they've just drifted away and don't follow the Lord anymore. And the example that's most important to us is the life of Jesus, and that's the life that the writer of Hebrews tells us to look at. He uses the word endurance too. The writer of Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, he says, "Since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Jesus too endured. If you read the next verse too, "For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." Jesus endured the hostility that he faced in his life from when he was a young lad to when he died on the cross and finished his ministry. If you look at, from what we understand from the Bible, even the family of Jesus kind of looked down on him during his life, because when he started his ministry, you see that his brothers are despising him, and you see that in the Gospels, that they don't really trust that he's the Son of God, in spite seeing his life for these so many years. They've seen him live such a holy life for so long, and they despise him. And Jesus endured that hostility by sinners. He endured the temptations that he faced, and he faced every kind of temptation that we face. He endured all of these things, and God found him worthy at the end of his life. And so that's the example that I want to follow too. I want to run hard on the race that is set before me, enduring through times of ease, enduring through times of difficulty, enduring through times of plenty, enduring through times of little, enduring through times of cheerfulness, and enduring through times of sorrow. And at the end of our life, I want to hear God saying, "Good and faithful servant." When Jesus talks about the last times in Mark chapter 13, he says in Mark chapter 13, verse 13, from verse 12, "Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end, he will be saved." It's it doesn't matter what my life looks right now. It's only if I endure to the end that I will be saved. God looks at where I finished my life, and I want it to be said that I endured to the end, that I was saved because I endured to the end. May that be true. Praise God.